Welcome to part 3 of our Russian Civil War overview. So we've met the Reds and we've met the Whites. Let's just take a quick look at some of the others that are involved in this very messy, very complex civil war. And of course we have the Allied intervention. So we've got the British, the French, the Americans, and also the Japanese. The French tended to be in the south. Our British, French and Americans are up in the very north, pushing down. The British are also together with the French down in the south. And the Americans and the Japanese, rather than being close to the action, were way over in the far east, on the other side of Siberia. And you can actually see these are troops here, American troops marching into Vladivostok, way over on the Pacific side of Russia. Now, as I've said before, we don't see a huge amount of Allied intervention directly in military conflict. Mostly the way that we see the Allies intervening and being involved in the Russian Civil War is through supplies and backup. One of the interesting things, though, is that sometimes the supplies which the Allies provided very quickly, instead of falling into the White hands, fell into the Red Army hands. And there are examples of Red Army members thanking the Allies for the new boots that they've received because they very quickly came under the control of the Reds. So Allied intervention becomes important in the Civil War, not necessarily because of its direct military impact, but actually because of the ideological impact. Have a think about that. The Reds are able to claim that they are the ones who are really representing Russia and Russia's interests. What they do is they portray the Whites as being led by the Allies. Remember the cartoon I showed you before with the white generals shown as dogs being led by the Allies. And also that the Allies are coming just to return Russia to the old ways, to the old Tsarist ways. And there are many peasants, for example, and proletariat within the Red borders who are, not wanting to return to the old ways, who want to maintain that more classless society and certainly control of land. And so Allied intervention can be seen more as an ideological impact on the war rather than a direct military impact. There are other groups. I've mentioned before how complex this war is. So the Greens, as they are sometimes referred to, are peasant-based, sometimes nationalist forces. Some are anarchists. They are people who are not necessarily happy with what the Reds are offering or what the Whites are offering. We sometimes see them referred to as blue units as well, and black units as well, the black anarchists under the control of anarchist Nestor Makhno, for example. Most of these are operating further down to the south and to the west, and one of the significant ones is operating in the Ukraine, and they are nationalists who are seeking to force themselves to be independent from Russia. So that's why they're not necessarily aligned with the Reds or the Whites, and at times we see them fighting against both, changing sides. So while you don't need to know a great amount of detail about these particular units that are involved, being aware of their existence and the complicating factors in the Civil War does help you to understand what emerges and what the Bolsheviks need to control once the Civil War has been won and the Whites have been defeated. Also, just to mention a part of the Civil War which is interesting to understand, and that is the Czech Legion. So the Czechs, of course, were originally part of Austria-Hungary, who were fighting against the Russians. And many Czechs had been taken prisoners of war during World War I and moved back deep into Russia away from the war. During 1917, there had actually been a plan to recruit 40,000 Czech prisoners of war who were willing to fight alongside Russians against the Austro-Hungarians. And what they were fighting for, of course, was independence for the Czech Republic. We also see Slovaks, who were also part of Austria-Hungary, also join in. So in 1918, we see there are 70,000 Czechs and Slovaks who were keen to rejoin World War I. They don't want to fight against the Russians. They want to go back and try to seek their independence from Austria-Hungary. But as the Bolsheviks seized control and they signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, the dreams and hopes of these Czechs and Slovaks is now being wasted. And the Bolsheviks are not keen to let them travel through the war-torn middle of Russia to get back. So our Czech Legion was somewhere out here in the middle of nowhere, and really what they wanted to do was try to get that way, but they couldn't because of the civil war that had started. So instead, they wanted to go this way, and they wanted to travel all the way along the railway line to Vladivostok, then take off from there, go around the world, to go back across America and find their way eventually back to Europe, where they could take part in World War I again. Unfortunately for the Czech Legion, despite their intentions to rejoin World War I, they get caught up instead in the Civil War. So while they're trying to make their way in this direction, they're stopped by the Bolsheviks. They were challenged. Okay, so that Trans-Siberian Railway, which is this one going all the way along, the Czechs wanted to use it, but they can't. They're just being blocked. This is civil war, and they are unable to move. So between May and July 1918, the Czech Legion is moving around trying to break through. Again, don't really want to fight the Bolsheviks. They want to get back to World War I. But they end up fighting the Bolsheviks because the Bolsheviks are stopping them from moving. And this here is a picture of part of the Czech Legion in control of parts of the railway. What we see the Czech Legion doing is successfully gaining control of that railway, seizing control of it from the Bolsheviks. And one of the interesting things about this Czech Legion is it actually creates this resistance against the Bolsheviks, which the White Army are then able to build upon over in the east. And that's when we see Admiral Kolchak coming across and gaining control of that particular area over in the east to fight back against the Bolsheviks. One last thing I want to show you as part of this overview is the use of propaganda. Propaganda is a really important part of the Russian Civil War, and from the very beginning the Reds were much better at it than the Whites. The Whites actually don't use it until much later, and that's only after they were encouraged to do so by the Allies. The Allies could see the potential for the propaganda. The Reds, the Whites tended to think of themselves as they understood their own crusade. They just wanted to return to the old ways. They didn't feel that they needed to actually get the peasants on side. But as the war goes on, what they can see is that the Reds have effectively used propaganda to gain support for the Red cause. International intervention on the side of the Whites really just provided fodder for the Red propaganda. And we've talked before about that ideological impact of the Allied intervention. The Reds use it against the Whites. Not all Red propaganda was socialist in nature. Okay, sometimes it just tapped into the needs and desires of the audience, a nationalist kind of sense of saving Russia. And we'll take a look at some of the posters in just a moment. And the other thing that is an important part of propaganda being used in the Civil War is this agitprop. Very much designed by Trotsky. He really pushes this kind of idea of using propaganda. So it's agitational propaganda. It's propaganda which is looking to actually agitate people, to get people involved, to get them on side with the Reds. And they do it often by trains, the agit trains that go across the Bolshevik territory, and from village to village they go, and they put on plays, and they stick up pamphlets that can be shared by those who can read. They play movies inside train carriages. They have art, and all of it is designed. This is kind of a travelling propaganda show, and it's designed to take certain messages out to the villagers, out to the peasants, to get them on side with the Bolshevik ideology. Here's an example poster. This one's from 1918. And what you've got here is the big, ugly hand of the white forces stretching out. And here is the gallant red soldier about to cut off the grasping hand of the white army to pull it back. So we've got these strong, idealistic ideas of what the Red Army represents. Here's another one, similar kind of thing. We've got a Red Army soldier. This time, however, in 1920, he's fighting off this capitalist. We know he's an Allied capitalist because he's wearing a top hat and tails. We always see that representation of the big fat capitalist. And here is the Red Army soldier beating back that capitalist. So this is the Allied intervention that is being alluded to as well. Here are some photographs to give you an idea of how information was being spread. At the bottom, we've got broadsheets, so large newspapers were spread throughout the Red Army. Of course, only Bolshevik ideas are able to be spread in this way, but literacy was something that was really encouraged within the Red Army. So there would be, Red Army soldiers teaching each other to read, and certainly they would share information in that way. And this one is more of a roaming propaganda unit. It's on a cart. It's being pulled from village to village. Not all peasants could read, of course, but there would always be somebody in the village who would be able to read out the messages to the rest of the villagers. And the very famous agit trains. Here's an example of one. You can see it's covered. This is a train carriage, you can see, that's here, and it's covered in messages, in lovely images of Lenin here in 1920, and it's a form of travelling propaganda. Okay, libraries of material, including radios, printing presses. So it wasn't just actually delivering, but also educating the population to develop their own ideas in order to keep spreading the Bolshevik ideas. The whites had their own propaganda, although not as effectively used. And you can see that the posters I'm about to show you are from much later in the war. This one's saying, "Go save my son and homeland." So it is trying to tap into that peasant idea of wanting to save their corn, save their grain from the Reds. When we talk about war communism, you can see why this message might have been effective in getting peasant support. Here's another one, a very ugly one. And here is Lenin, and here is Trotsky, and they are leading the international communist revolution and killing the pure and innocent white cause as they go along. Very, very ugly poster, and you can see the lengths that they're starting to go to show how mean and how evil and how terrible Bolshevism was, not just in Russia, but its threat to the whole of the world. One more, and this is another White Army poster, And this one, the slogan of Russia one and indivisible. And we've got this a white knight in the air. And what are they defeating? They're defeating a red dragon, which of course represents the Bolsheviks. Propaganda, remember, is important. And that's it for this